welcome to today's session. And first of all, I would like to thank everyone for registering to today's Magento Masters Virtual Series 8th episode. So it's been 8 episodes. We were traveling with different Magento Masters in different areas of Magento insights we have been hearing. So I would like to give a quick intro about the company behind, the community behind this series, DCKAP. So DCKAP has been actively organizing Magento meetups for more than 5 years. And we all know like COVID-19 or the novel coronavirus has impacted like, it's most of the global economy like never before. While businesses are expecting return to normalcy and start functioning as usual, so we are still in a kind of an unflow situation and uncertainty which prevails. So we were looking for some means to organize meetup to reach the Magento community. So our idea was to open Magento Master. Yes, our answer was to bring in the Magento Masters to our community, to hear from them, to share their insights with people across the globe through this virtual meetup. So our first virtual meetup happened in April, so 2 months ago, and it was indeed a great success. And that spirit made us think, and why not facilitate such meetups frequently? Until now, we have hosted around like 7 episodes, and we are here now in 8th episode with Riccardo, Rick, alias Rick. So that is how the Magento community call him. So he's a 2x Magento master, and he is here with us to share his insights on Magento service isolation as a part to microservices. And it's my privilege to give him a small introduction about Riccardo. So we all grew up with bread and butter, but no, Riccardo is something different, I would say. So he grew up with bread and computer science. His first gift was from his parent was an PC. So that was cool. Over time, he became a developer with an exceptionally broad knowledge of most disparate areas of the field. And he has been with the Skeeller, formerly it was an Idealia group, since 2019 as the founder and technical director, and the mainstay of the technical department of MageSpecialist, and he is a senior analyst and software architect, Magento specialist, senior PHP developer, and technical manager. And Riccardo started working with Magento solutions since early 2008 with the old version of Magento. After falling in love with this new technology, he became Magento certified developer and certified developer focusing on developing and finding new Magento solutions. And in 2015, he started working with Magento 2, and that is where his contribution started with Magento community. In 2018, he has become one of the most active contributors in key projects like MSI and a community maintainer. As a community maintainer, he has got a Magento Master Mover Award in 2019 and 2020. And congratulations, Rick. And we are very honored to have you on our series. And also, I would like to grab this opportunity to give you guys a quick intro about DCKAP, the organization behind the series and all this community development. So DCKAP is a digital commerce agency specializing in building e-commerce storefronts for clients abroad. And we specialize in Magento, Shopify, and BigCommerce. And also with over 15 years of experience in the industry, we have developed a handful of products that allows brands and businesses to unleash their full potentials. And these are some of our product suites. Productimize, a product customization platform, and the Clores, an automated integration tool between ERP, CRM, and e-commerce stores, and FlexiPIM, a product information management platform, a QA Touch, a smart test management platform which we have, and we are launching soon a DCKAP WISB, is an analytical platform for track daily, monthly, and annual sales. And that said, and I don't want to hold you guys from hearing out the capitative session by the wonderful speaker lined up today. I'm sure that you will have a great learning experience today. And over to you, Rick. And thank you so much for accepting our invitation.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, actually. So I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. And then we start with the most common question during a video conference. Can you see my screen? Yeah, I suppose you can see anyway. No need to answer. So this is a short introduction about me. Actually, you heard already something, and but yeah, my name is Riccardo Tempesta. I'm CTO at MageSpecialist. I'm also a Magento Master. I've been a Magento Master for the last 2 years. And well, actually, I hope for the third one in a row, but let's see what happened. I'm also a Magento contributor and a Magento maintainer. But the most proud thing I can say about myself is that I'm pizza addicted, actually. But please no pineapple on pizza because I'm Italian and I take this very seriously. And I am also proud father of Julia since 2019. And yes, I nerd, deeply, deeply, deeply nerd. And you will understand even looking at this presentation. So what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about Magento service isolation. I've been speaking about Magento service isolation a lot of times, but this is the first time I want to talk about it as path to microservices. And actually, this is more a question than a topic. So actually, it's Magento service isolation as a path for microservices. So can be considered Magento service isolation as path to microservices. Well, actually, we will see. I don't know exactly, but I want to. It's like a kind of open discussion. I have some interesting aspects I want to share with you, but maybe I don't know if any one of you want to know something more before about service isolation and microservices, because most of the people just heard about service isolation and microservices, but I'm not very sure that everyone knows exactly what they mean. Well, actually, I have an idea as well, so no problem. So I think you may have some other questions before. So for example, what are microservices? Because, you know, today everyone is talking about microservices. Everything is microservices. You got Netflix as microservices. Everyone has microservices. So microservices have to be very cool. Well, actually they are, but they are also very complex to implement and they have a lot of drawbacks. And I want to give you some insight about that. So what are microservices? Let's say that when you create an application and you follow the old path, basically you create a kind of monolith. So the application is just everything is in one place and you develop everything, every single feature inside this application. With microservices, you take this monolith and you, and simplifying, of course, you split into small services. Every single feature becomes a small service and you connect them together. But of course, you cannot just simply pick all the feature of an application and just split them. Of course, there are rules, there are best practice, and so on. Especially because even the term application is not very precise from my perspective when we talk about microservices, because I don't know if we should call it more a system, an integrated system. I don't know, because application usually is something that you use when you have a small software solution or stuff like that. Usually microservices are for something maybe more complex. And I told you before, you cannot simply take this application, split the application in a small part and connect them together. It will be nice actually, but it doesn't work this way. Usually, if you do this in first place, you have to connect them together and distribute across the network. So you have to follow some specific rule. Otherwise, what you're going to create is called. Do you know anything about spaghetti coding? The term spaghetti coding. So basically, spaghetti coding is a term meaning that when you create an application and you do in the 80s way, so in the same way we were creating application 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you create everything inside and everything is connected with everything in a total mess. So it's like creating, you know, a spaghetti dish. So if you pull a spaghetti from one side of the dish, you probably break something from the other side. And I especially like this image. I don't know, maybe because I'm Italian, so I like spaghetti and can be. So you should avoid creating the same situation with microservices. So you don't simply need to split the application and connect more or less all the parts, because otherwise you will have spaghetti coding, but with a more advanced technology. But you will not solve your problem. You just will change. You just will change your technology. So let's see how each service should be. So when you split this application, every single service is supposed to be, yeah, highly maintainable, independently, of course, and testable. Testable, I think, is one of the most important aspects in microservices, because when you can test something, and when I say testing, in this specific case, I mean unit testing, usually you completely isolate that service. So you're able to if you're able to fully test that service, probably that service is correctly isolated from the others. And this is a good starting point. They have to be loosely coupled. So they should, of course, be depending to other services, but they should be agnostic. So basically, actually, I think that this loosely coupled part is most probably connected to the last part, the last point, that is owned by a small team. So basically, when you create a service, each service should be handled by a different team, or can be handled, it depends. And when this happens, usually you must isolate the responsibility of the service in a very specific way if you want different teams to work then together. And if you have different teams working on different services, probably they will become loosely coupled. Otherwise, you will have actually a mess, probably. They should be independently deployable and scalable. This is very important. But when you achieve this kind of independency, usually you must create a kind of service contract between services, because if they have to be independent each other but connected, you have to make sure, for example, you have a good API documentation on each single service. Otherwise, when you upgrade one service, it can be not backward compatible with the whole system. So you're going to break something. And organized around business capabilities. This is, of course, and this especially, I think this point also hide and shadows another important part, is that every single service should have a specific responsibility. So you don't have to simply split the application. You have to split the application responsibility and features. But we will see deeper later what are microservices, and I have a couple of examples. And what is service isolation? Well, service isolation seems to be almost the same as microservices. No, it's another aspect of the microservices and can be applied even to non-microservices approach. So let's say, but I'm very simplifying. So microservices, let's say, is a term that is architecturally oriented, and service isolation is more implementation oriented. This is not a precise sentence, but let's say we can simplify in this way. So let's see one example of microservices without service isolation, because having microservices doesn't mean that you have a full service isolation. Let's say you have service A, B, and C in your microservice architecture, and you connect them, as you can see in my picture, in my screen. So basically, you got service A connected to service B connecting back to service A, and everyone is referring to the same database. You got microservices because service A, B, and C are supposed to be microservices, but they are not isolated. They are each other dependent, basically, and they all depend on the same database, for example. So basically, this is not service isolation, absolutely. This is a kind of messy microservice implementation, probably. So beware, because when you create microservices, if you don't do it the right way, as I told you previously, you're going to replicate all the same problem you had yesterday, but with a new technology. So it's absolutely something to avoid. So what is service isolation actually? This is service isolation. So we got, again, service A, B, and C, but they communicate each other using, of course, API. So they don't simply connect each other in a random way or in an unknown way, but they have specific API and service contracts. And each one of them has an isolated database in this example. So what does it mean? I can scale them independently. Because in my previous example, I couldn't scale them, for example, because I had one single database in which everyone is connecting. Yes, I know I can scale the database, but I cannot scale microservices independently. So when you cannot do that, you're not implementing probably in the right way. And this is, in this new scheme, you can see everyone is totally almost independent. So I can upgrade them without a problem. Of course, I have to keep in mind the API, backward compatibility, and stuff like that, but I can do that. So basically, this is the difference between having a system with modules made by modules and having a modular system. Because you have a lot of solutions in the open source world, closed source world, or whatever you want to see, in which you have modules. But you cannot say, for example, I'm taking one module and I'm disabling it. Because sometimes the whole solution is breaking. Take Magento 1, for example. Magento 1 had modules, but not modularity at all. You couldn't, for example, simply shut down the, let's say, the catalog. Oh my God. If you, well, actually, you cannot even do this in Magento 2. So this is why I say Magento 2 is in the path 2, because actually it is still in the middle. And let's come to the more important question. What is Magento? Yeah, I know that you probably know that Magento is an open source solution for e-commerce. Well, actually, I hope you know, because otherwise I don't know why you're looking at this video. But I think you know. So what is Magento from the microservice or service isolation perspective? None of the above. So yeah, I know now you're probably asking, this guy probably is crazy, or why are we here talking about microservices? Service isolation as part of microservices in a Magento related speech. But well, because Magento is changing the direction and is moving to service isolation, and absolutely in a very good way. And this started since Magento 2.3. Of course, it's an ongoing process. But let's see. Okay, yesterday's Magento. So before Magento 2.3, how was Magento? Basically, it was what I told you before. So you got modules, but they were connecting together in a very actually messy way. So you couldn't detach one single module. You couldn't simply isolating the responsibility of a single module. So for example, you had a catalog and inventory, and it's just two models in the core. Well, actually, in the core, I think that inventory was catalog inventory actually, and they were connected together in a kind of circular dependency. So a catalog was depending from inventory, and inventory was depending from catalog. This is not good, of course, because we said before, this is not service isolation, absolutely. So how you usually fix a circular dependency like this? If you, well, the most popular example when fixing circular dependency is when you have, for example, in PHP, this is an example just to make you understand. You have class A that extends class B, and of course you cannot have class B extending class A because this is a circular dependency. And wherever you find a circular something in the IT, usually is not good. Well, in this specific case, you cannot even implement in PHP. So how you usually decouple this kind of dependency? Well, simply adding a third part. So in this case, class C, that is extending both class A and class B. Of course, this is very simple. This is something that everyone that develops in PHP knows. Well, I hope. Well, sometimes I see PHP code that me understand that this sentence could be not true, but this is another story. So how it's becoming Magento 2 today? After the 2.3 and a specific project that you know I'm very in love with, that is MSI, that today actually changed the name, is Magento Inventory. A new approach to the software was introduced. And well, I've been contributing a lot to this project, so I like it very much. And I think it's the first very real step of Magento to a very advanced architecture. Because before, we simply had a very advanced product, but with a, let's say, an architecture that everyone has at the end. But with MSI, something new was introduced, and this new way is going to be extending actually to the whole core. But it takes time probably, and it will take, I don't know, probably years. So how does it work? The decoupled dependency modules, because before we saw one example with PHP classes. Well, it's very simple. Let's take the previous example, catalog and inventory. If you need something connecting them together, you create another module that is catalog inventory. Like in the same way we were creating a new class, we're going to create two new connections. And if you do this, you can, for example, create this new catalog inventory module, pluginizing catalog and pluginizing inventory, for example. In this way, you can add to inventory everything is necessary to inventory to connect to catalog and vice versa. So basically, you make them independently. You can upgrade them independently, but of course, you will need this class in this module in the middle. But mind, of course, one very important part. If you implement in this way, you have to make sure that you're pluginizing, you're changing or connecting something that is in the service contract. Otherwise, you will break something, absolutely. And we want to have a full service isolation, so every single module must be upgradable independently. Actually, I think it's more easy to see an example. So you can just go to the Magento source and look, for example, to everything that contains inventory, and you will find some very good implementation about this idea. So I told you before, you have to make sure that when you connect two modules together, you're using the service contracts communication. So basically, you can connect two modules only through service contract. If you don't know what service contract means, well, it's interface. Let's say that a service contract is an interface. Actually, service contract means something more, is something more abstract. So service contract means you are, let's say you are subscribing a contract with the rest of the world saying that a specific method will be always there in the code, it will never change. So when you're going to upgrade, for example, you need to upgrade the module B to a new version, module B 2.0, and you need to change that method. You should be creating another one and proxy the previous one, for example. So this is the only way to have independently upgradable module. And this is what Magento want to achieve. And actually, this is the secret behind service isolation. And to achieve this, you have even to change your approach. So when you create a new module, our module is the B, we create an interface module and an implementation module. So in this way, we can change the engine without changing the interface. You will notice in the new Magento implementation a lot of modules called API at the end. So you have inventory API, you have a lot of modules ending with API. This is why, because all the interfaces or classes inside the API module are supposed to be service contracts. This is why you can find something like that. So in the previous Magento implementation, you had one single module, including every single feature of your module. And in the new way, you will find this module split in different parts. So you have module API, for example, you have module GraphQL, you have module UI, module admin UI, and of course, the module implementation itself. So as you can see, everything that is an interface is ejected from the engine. So a module API is an interface containing usually web API. Module GraphQL contains all the GraphQL interfaces to that module. For example, you got module UI because UI, it's an interface with humans, and module admin UI is an interface, for example, with human as well. So I got a question in the chat. What if you disable the module which have the old implementation of a service contract of another module? Does it make it kind of hard dependency? I'm not sure I understood exactly your question. So if you disable a module with a service contract and another module is depending, I suppose I'm trying to understand. So if I'm not correctly understanding your question, please type something. If you disable the module that have the old implementation of a service contract, that module is supposed to be the only responsible for that service contract. And if another module is requesting the feature from that service contract, it's supposed to be depending from that other module. And you should, for example, in the Magento implementation, have a composer dependency. So actually, you cannot break anything if you declare the dependency in the right way. Because when we talk about service isolation, we don't say that module must be not depending. They should be isolated. Of course, module can declare dependency on other modules. Otherwise, you cannot have any kind of good communication across modules. So I don't know if I correctly answered your question. If I didn't, just type or contact me in private. So coming back to our presentation. So what happened if when we split all these modules in this way? Of course, you will have tons of modules. If you, for example, look at the MSI implementation and the inventory implementation, we have, I don't remember how many exactly, but more than 40 modules for a single feature. Well, actually, it's a very complex feature, but yeah, for more than 40. So actually, the first reaction is panic. Don't panic, but okay, panic. Well, of course, it can be quite confusing at the very beginning, but if you go deeper, you will see that isolating all the features in this way helps you even to better understand what is the responsibility behind each single module, and helps you to, you know, what I think about Magento, that is, it's a very nice product, but sometimes the most difficult part in Magento is finding where something happened. And with this approach, actually, you know perfectly where something is happening because you have responsibility perfectly isolated. So I think that if you go deeper and you can do, of course, even by yourself, you will find this very interesting. So I found that service isolation is a new, very interesting way if compared to the old approach of the monolith. Of course, microservices and service isolation have a lot of drawbacks. But if you start implementing in service isolation, sometimes you cannot come back to the old way anymore. But we are, to achieve a good isolation, we are forgetting something: the database. Yeah, in my previous example of microservices, I told you that to scale services independently, sometimes we make the big mistake to share one single database across different services. Of course, this helps you maybe to isolate the features, but not to scale the features. Because if you have the database, a monolithic database, and every service is connecting there, of course, it's a kind of bottleneck. And it's happening to Magento, because today you can scale Magento horizontally, but when you need to scale a database, you simply have to rely on a cluster database. Yeah, I know today you can even split vertically the database, but actually, I don't know how this solution works today. Let's see another question I see in the chat. How do you decide which part should be a different module? Well, this is a tricky question. So, so thank you for your question. Yeah, actually, there is not a specific rule. Well, actually, no. Well, there is a rule, but it's very complex. To understand this rule, you have to go deeper into the domain-driven design and to understand what is the context of a module, a context of a feature, and whatever. So usually you create a new module when you need to interface another context. So let's take the example I did previously with catalog and inventory. Let's say we're creating, like in the MSI, the inventory. So our context is inventory. Inventory needs to change something inside the catalog. So we need to create a kind of cross module, and we call it catalog inventory in the MSI specific case. So when we have to cross another context, we create a new module. Or maybe when you want to have something that is independent. So for example, I've been creating for MSI one algorithm to find the best source, so the best warehouse to deliver the goods from, and it was based on the Google API, the Google Map API. So I wanted this feature to be independent from the core, so I decided to create a specific module for that. And since this module was needing some content and some interaction from the inventory itself, and I don't remember how many other modules, whenever I needed to cross my context, I created a new module. So this is a kind of a long story short. Hope you understand. I answered to your question, but actually, if you want to go deeper, you can feel free to contact me privately, because this is a very complex question actually, and it cannot be answered in a simple way. I think this deserves a whole presentation, I think. But nice question actually. And going back to oh, you're welcome. Going back to the database. So we cannot rely, as I told before, on a single central database. And in the MSI example, or in the inventory example, I'm sorry, this is not the MSI example. In the inventory example, what you should do is to have a database for each single module, like we saw in the previous microservice example. But if we do this, we cannot use, for example, foreign keys, because if we have different databases, we cannot use foreign keys. So we have another question. how can we totally isolate the modules of a service? Suppose module I is getting some information from module B using module B service contract. So A is connecting B to ask something through service contract. In this case, I cannot disable or remove module B, because if I do so, my module A will not work as expected. Well, not only, it will totally break probably. Well, as I told you before, you have to define correctly your dependency. So in this specific case, your composer JSON should contain that module A is depending from module B. But yeah, it's again dependencies. Probably I don't know if your question was shadowing another one, because when you have interdependency, so let's say that module A depends on module B, and module B somehow depends on module A. How can you work around? You can use, as I told you before, 1/3 modules that is pluginizing both of them. So when you have this kind of situation, you can rely on a third module that, as I told you before, is a module that is acting as a cross-context adapter. So I say again, isolating doesn't mean to not depend on something else. You can depend on something else. And actually you have Composer for this in Magento. And in the microservices world, usually you're used to versionate the API to avoid this kind of problem. And in the microservices world, it's even more complex, because usually you have to rely on something that is called auto-discovery when you need to connect different modules. But this is another story that we can go deeper maybe in another presentation, because in Magento you declare each single module in config PHP, so the whole system knows perfectly what are the modules installed. But in the microservices world, doesn't work exactly in this way, or it doesn't work always in this way. So you may be, for example, extending the system through simply adding a service, and the whole system must be interacting with the service. And there are a lot of ways to do this, like, for example, as I told you, an auto-discovery of services, or changing totally the developing pattern using, for example, a communication bus or stuff like that. And if you like, we can go deeper. So I hope I correctly answered to your question. So if I didn't, just type something. Okay. Okay, I see another comment. I think even better approach would be to define an API endpoint as a service contract implementation instead of a class from another module. Exactly. This is why you have a lot of API modules in the new Magento implementation, because actually they're service contracts of classes. This is in the solid approach, this is called dependency inversion. So basically you rely on the API, you don't rely on the implementation. And the implementation depends on the API and not vice versa. This is very important. So if you want to check something about this solid development, I think that the key is the letter D, the last one, that is the dependency inversion. That is basically this exact idea. So to rely on API and not to rely on the engine itself. So coming back, we got this we got two databases we told before, and we cannot connect them using foreign keys, because if we do, of course, we need to have one SQL database. MySQL, for example, doesn't allow us to have foreign keys across two databases. So how can we achieve this? Simply, we don't use foreign keys. Well, it's simple. So basically, in this example, we use not IDs, for example, but natural keys or business keys. So we use the SKU and not the product ID to connect the two databases. So databases now are isolated. Please notice that using this approach is very important, but in general, I strongly believe in this approach in which you use natural keys or business keys instead of IDs, because IDs are something very private to the database usually, while natural keys are something that you can understand better. And usually they makes your life easier, a lot easier. But this actually open a lot of other aspects of service isolation. For example, is CQRS. I'm not going deeper in CQRS because it's a very complex topic, but CQRS stands for Command and Query Responsibility Segregation. What does it mean? When you have two services that are supposed to be independent and they need to communicate and exchange database information, this operation takes time. And for example, when you write something, you usually don't have the same information in the other model immediately, or you may not have. If you're a front-end developer and you are familiar with promises, probably you better understand what I mean. This is very simple to understand for example, React developers or people usually working with asynchronous front-end or asynchronous languages like JavaScript or maybe Python or something like that. So you must write your software accordingly. So maybe the information cannot be available immediately in the two different systems. And another important aspect, we said before, each service is supposed to be developed by different teams with different specialization, with different skills. So maybe the representation you have in service B is totally different from the database representation of service A. So maybe when you write something, you write in one mode. When you write something in service A, you write in some mode and you read in a totally different mode in service B. So this is why you must keep command and query. Command means writing something, and query, of course, means reading something. You have to keep them totally separated. So that is the opposite of the crude mode, in which you write and read the same resource in the same way. Actually, in the CQRS, you could be writing two resources and read one resource from the other side, for example, because you mix them, you project them in some way. And to answer the question that probably most of you are about to ask is, yes, we are talking about the DCKAP theorem in some way. For all the other people that don't know exactly what is DCKAP theorem, DCKAP theorem is it's a theorem. It's impressive. That means that that says that in a database, well, actually, it is not only related to database, but it's related to any kind of persisting system or persistency system. You have three aspects to keep in mind: availability, consistency, and partitioning. Availability means that you may have the information even if the databases are disconnected. Partitioning means you can vertically split your database into different parts. So for example, if you're talking about Magento, it could be, for example, having catalog in one database and cart in another database. And today actually is possible. If you didn't know, today in Magento, you can isolate in this way. You can have two different databases. I never tried, but I know you can. And consistency means that you have every time the database consistent. But the DCKAP theorem also says that you can just pick two of them. You cannot have all them together in a persistent system. And what we do here, and usually what people do in microservices, is to get rid of consistency. Well, of course, this depends on your implementation. It does not say you always drop consistency. But in our case, we want to drop consistency. That's, at the first sight, most of the people think I'm crazy or it's a crazy option. Well, actually, it is not so crazy because if you think we must have availability, of course, and we must have partitioning. Availability, of course, because we want to avoid to have one single point of failure, and partitioning because we want to scale the whole application independently. So we must get rid of consistency. Getting rid of consistency means, for example, to not have transactions or not have foreign keys that we saw before. So yesterday you had transaction. Transaction, as you know, is I make 1, 2, 3, 4 operation in the database, and I run them atomically in a single commit. So I'm sure that all the database is consistent. tomorrow we should be using sagas, for example. It's just one. It's just one approach. Of course, we have a lot of different approaches, like two-phase commit, but I don't like it, or other. We got another question in the chat. So in the latest version of Magento, can we have two databases, one for catalog and one for checkout? As far as I know, yes. As I told you before, I never tried, but as far as I know, catalog and quote, for example, are supposed to be independent. But please allow me to verify this, because I never tried by myself and I'm not sure it is available before 2.4. I'm sure this feature should be somewhere, or someone is working on that. But as I told before, I never tried it. I want to check it. So feel free to reach me in private and I will confirm this. But yes, anyhow, I know for sure that Magento is going to be allowing a vertical split of the database. And I don't know how many modules and which modules you can split together today. And this is very important because you can scale not each single module independently, as we would like to do, but at least you can scale a set of important features. Because for example, checkout and quote are very heavy in the Magento implementation. So if you can eject them in a different database cluster, can be very nice from the performance perspective. I hope I answered your question. So sagas. Sagas means that you have a kind of commit, but you have to take care of restoring each step separately. So you don't run them atomically like you do in a commit, but you got a local transaction in the service A, a local transaction on service B, and local transaction on service C, and they are connected together through one event message. This event message actually can be deployed in several ways. For example, it can be a queue or whatever, or there are specific software solutions actually for this. But what does it mean? That if something goes wrong, you have to go back in the history and change this single part. Usually when you have to explain sagas, you refer to one guy booking one vacation. So you have to reserve your hotel, you have to buy one airplane ticket, you have to maybe rent a car. So you make different operations, and one after the other. But what happens if you cannot go in vacation anymore? You have to cancel each one of them independently. This is more or less what happened in sagas. So you have to keep in mind all these steps and revert them together. It's like what you do actually in Git, for example. Usually when you approach this, you have two main ways that are choreography or orchestration. Choreography, for example, is when each service is more or less as a more or less peer-to-peer approach with the other services. So service I, for example, can publish one event. So I run this commit and publish this event, and all the other services are picking this event from a queue or a bus communication, and they're running their commit or they cancel the commit. So basically, each one is taking care of itself. This is why it's choreography, because everyone is independent, but them together are coordinated. This is very cool, especially if you approach the microservices in a discovery way, because you don't need to centrally register one service, but each service knows what is happening outside. So it's able to react somehow. And I prefer this approach, but of course it depends on your implementation. The opposite of choreography is orchestration, in which we have a central system that is coordinating all the other systems. So, hey, service A, you have to do this operation. Hey, service B, you have to do this other operation. This is very cool, but usually is the opposite of having a modular system or an auto-discovery-based system, because of course each single service is supposed to be registered or to register itself inside the orchestrator. And the orchestrator must be aware of every single service. I don't like this very much, but sometimes it's very effective. Another way of facing the database independency is event sourcing. Event sourcing is awesome. It's a very stupid idea behind, but it's genius somehow because it's very simple. So event sourcing is to understand the state of my system now. I don't rely on the data itself, but I rely on the history of the data. So imagine you have different services running different operations, and you have, like in this case, this is a real implementation of the Magento 2 inventory reservation, for example. Reservation are, if you don't know, when you ordered something and you didn't ship. So basically you got this quantity reserved, so no one can buy this quantity of the product, but you didn't yet ship, so you got in inventory. And how does it work? Event sourcing. So basically, you to understand what is today, you create the history. So you got, for example, for this product, I had quantity 10 with a 0 reservation. So I declared the initial state of this product. Then someone, for example, buys something, so the order is placed, and I say reserved 2, and then order is shipped. So I say, okay, free these 2 items. So to understand exactly how many products I have a reservation today and what is my quantity, I have to rebuild the history. It's more or less what it happens with your bank account. So you see, you have negative and positive transaction. Well, in my case, are all negative. I don't know why, but yeah, that's very. This is another story. And to understand how many money you have today, you can rebuild through looking the history. This is more or less event sourcing, and this is very cool because sometimes it's very effective. And we're going to come to an end, but beyond the development, I want to say something about the mindset you have to have when approaching microservices or service isolation in Magento or in any other system. We told before that each service can be handled by different teams. So they can handle different contexts, they can have different skills, they can have different representations. So each single service must be totally agnostic, developed to the others. This is very important. So, but what is the important part actually is that if you take care of all these aspects, you will see that you will perfectly isolate all the features of your application in a small service with a very precise responsibility. And this is very important, not only for scalability, deploy policies and so on, but even for maintenance, because you know perfectly what is doing a specific model. This is very important because it requires a mind shift. So I got a question, how is multi-warehouse handled in the current MSI model? Oh, well, this is another, thank you for your question. It's very complex. I had a whole presentation about this, so actually it's very complex, and I don't know if we have time today, but feel free to reach me in private, because you have to consider that, for example, multi-warehouse in the MSI model took something like 2 years of development, and it's still ongoing of, I don't know how many hundreds of people. So it's a super complex system. So feel free to reach me in private, and I can go more in details. So definitely, this is a great evolution of Magento, and I hope that in the next future we can see Magento 3 that has microservices. And I think I finished to be boring. So yeah, if you have some last question I can't refuse, feel free to do it now. Of course, I don't have so much time. If this question is too complex, feel free to reach me in private. This is my Twitter handle. This is the fastest way to reach me. And thank you everyone for your time. Yeah, thank you for.
Yeah, thank you so much for the insightful session, and it was lively. I would say, like in between, like you were able to manage the questions. And have you gone through the questions in Q&A tab?
Oh no, I was, yeah, I had just the chat question open, so I'm sorry I didn't see that one. So I can try to answer now. So if Magento in the current state isn't too we're near to the microservices service isolation in a messy way, why not to build a new identity M3 with a better architecture? Well, I'm not the right person to ask to. Probably I would say yes, it would work to have M3, but I don't think that Adobe thinks the same. So I don't know, because actually, Magento is not, it doesn't have a bad architecture, absolutely. I think it's one of the most powerful framework ever, allowing you to develop very powerful application, but its implementation is stuck to 2008. Of course, I would say, because when you create a product, when Magento 1 was created was 2008, and Magento 2, of course, had to keep a kind of compatibility with its previous system. I say a kind of. So probably the implementation is still stuck there. I know they're migrating, but they want to make sure, given that this migration is not totally destructive. So I see another question. So for example, why not working in parallel? I don't know, again, because I'm not a Magento employee. So I think the right person to ask this are the great Magento guys. So you can, for example, just join the Slack channel and ask them, hey, why not or not you realizing M3? But pay attention, because they're very sensitive about this. So another question is, having Magento admin and front end of some web apps serving on different services, why the common database? Could it be considered a small implementation of services? I'm sorry, if you can explain better your question. But I think you're asking why the front end and the admin are not decoupled solutions and independent application. I think you're meaning this. If you're asking this, well, of course, in the front end you have, for example, the PWA Studio that is supposed to be an independent front end, and you can also use Adobe Experience Manager, for example. So actually, do not think at Magento front end and backend as the sole way to implement that interface. I had another speech previously in another session talking about how to extend Magento outside Magento. Because in Magento you have API, you have GraphQL, so basically you can feel free to create your independent front-end or back-end application. Actually, I did sometimes, and it's very effective. And so you can perfectly isolate. And yeah, the admin they're trying, as far as I know, they try to decouple. And today you can find, for example, in each module of the new approach, one module UI and module admin UI. This makes me hope that tomorrow we will be able to not install the Magento traditional admin UI or front-end UI and have a different one. So then another question is, when is the existing catalog inventory module 2 would begin? I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm not the right person again to ask this. But sooner or later, of course, it will be removed, because today is a kind of, in 2.3, it's a kind of module. It's not totally independent, but yeah, well, actually, no, you can consider it an independent module, but it's replacing totally the inventory. I'm not sure if in the 2.4, for example, it will be removed. I have to inform myself. I'm sorry, I cannot answer this, but I cannot even say something about the Magento roadmap, because I'm not a Magento employee, so I cannot say anything official. But I heard something, of course, about removing sooner or later. third question I see is, how is inventory module completely independent from catalog? Is it still needs queue to identify the product, which would be defined in catalog module? Well, of course, but SKU is just one property. It is not something that is completely related to catalog. Of course, we can use SKU in the inventory as well, because when we talk about different contexts in the domain-driven design I was talking before, you have to keep in mind that something as a meaning inside a context if a domain expert, for example, can understand. So if I say SKU stands for stock keeping unit. So it's a property that is that makes sense both in the catalog and the inventory. Of course, the inventory, it is not independent from the catalog, but can be independent from the catalog implementation you have in Magento. So imagine tomorrow you want to change, this is a kind of sci-fi hypothesis, you want to change the current implementation of Magento catalog, and you want to use, for example, one product information management instead of the catalog itself. Let's say you want to use Akeneo. You can do that if it is completely independent, because the new inventory will be connecting this new product information management. Of course, you have to write all the adapting code to do this, but the problem will not be the SKU itself. Okay, I see another, to clarify existing catalog inventory modules, I think is not a question, probably is a part of the previous question. May you provide an example of how isolation is different from dependency? Well, it is not isolation being different from dependency. There are two different concepts. So isolations means that you can, for example, test your module independently from another. This is, I think, the key definition of isolation. Dependency means that your module that is isolated, well, I know perfectly that when I say isolated, it can be misleading, because isolated doesn't mean you don't need anyone else from the outside. It means you can develop in an isolated way. So you can, for example, mock everything as an input and have an output. This is more or less the meaning of isolation. So having isolation doesn't mean you don't need dependency. Of course you will need dependency, otherwise you're creating a black box application. So there are two different things. I see another one that I think both work in parallel. I think is someone referring to the previous question in the chat, if you can split the database. So yeah. Again, I think you can ask directly the Magento guys. Last question, should there be any specific protocols for service to connect to each other for microservices? Well, I don't know if your question is more microservices oriented or is more Magento oriented. If it's Magento oriented today, you cannot split Magento in different, I mean, you cannot split Magento modules in different nodes, for example. Is PHP communicating internally? So actually there is no this, but I think you're referring to something like you have in Java, like JNE, something like that probably. I know that some time ago, Antocril was talking about creating the so-called proxy modules that basically were wrapping the code to a method and somehow forward through a web connection. But I'm not sure if they're going to develop this or they change their mind. So yeah, I think it's more or less everything.
That's great, Rick. So you made this session like really lively, and I believe the participants would have enjoyed it. And before ending the session, I would like to show a sneak preview of the speaker for our next Magento Master Virtual Series. So that is our 9th Magento Master Virtual Series. So let me share my screen. Okay. So we have Alexander Kravchenk, the Magento Master of 2020. and he's a backend developer at Waymo. And he's gonna take us through the brave new world of Magento 2.4, and he's gonna talk about more on the developer perspective of Magento 2.4, and about the inventory project and the store in-store pickup and the killer features in Magento 2.4. And that said, and thank you so much, everyone, for spending your valuable time. And thank you, Rick, for your valuable time and making our session really insightful and lively. I hope like everyone enjoy it. And that said, looking forward to hosting another insightful session. And thank you. Okay. So I believe like we have more questions.
Oh, I didn't see. I got another question that is, with microservice isolation, is there any benefit to handle large source size? Well, I think the question is the opposite, I think, but I'm not sure. That is, if I have a larger source size, do I benefit using microservices isolation, microservices and service isolation? Well, of course, yes, because if you have a large installation of Magento, you will sooner or later face some performance issue. And the only way you have today to address the performance issue is to install more Magento front ends, so scale horizontally, and use a bigger database cluster with service isolation, but not the today's implementation probably, but the tomorrow implementation. You can, for example, split your application in across different nodes and balance the load of each single feature. As I told you before, you can more or less do the same today with the database, because you can split different features of Magento across different databases. As again, I have to investigate if you can isolate the checkouts. But yeah, of course you will benefit. And I see also, I was asking about microservices in general, by the way. I think this is related to the previous question of the protocol. Well, I think the protocol you will use depends on a lot of things. First of all, what is the platform you're using, the architecture you're using. So for example, if you're going to develop for your services with the same framework, with the same language, for example, because if you're going to, let's say, create one service in PHP and one service in Node, let's say that is a very common case in Magento. It happened to me a lot of time to create external services for Magento, external microservices for Magento, made in Node.js. You have to find something agnostic. So actually, there is not a simple question, I think. It actually depends on the context, on the solution you want to achieve.
Perfect. So thank you so much, Rick. And no, it's kind of extended. The session got extended. It's all because of your lively session, I would say. Thank you, everyone, and see you and stay safe. Until then, bye-bye. I'll be looking forward to hosting another insightful session with an amazing Magento master. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for having me.